Hey, it's Mistress Carrie reporting for duty from MCHQ for episode 40 of the Mistress Carrie podcast. This episode of the podcast is sponsored by Digital Federal Credit Union, but they're better known by all of us as DCU. And not only is DCU a great place to bank at, but they are also a great place to work, and they are hiring right now for full and part-time positions. And I know, it might be a really unique time to try and visualize yourself at a new job. But at DCU, they're here to help you make the change, along with offering a benefits package that includes 3 weeks vacation, a competitive salary, a generous bonus program, 401k plan with 100% company match up to 7%, plus tuition reimbursement, a student loan payment assistance program, and so much more. Now that sounds good. So to learn more about DCU and career opportunities, visit dcu.org/careers. DCU is proud to be an equal employment opportunity and affirmative action employer. This episode of the podcast is also sponsored by MistressCarrie.com, which is where you can find every episode of the Mistress Carrie podcast. And I'm not just talking about the weekly feature episodes, but also every episode of the Sit Rep, which is all of your rock headlines, music news, and industry info in less than 5 minutes every weekday. Plus every episode of Cocktails in the War Room, the events calendar, my blog, my photo galleries, and the official online Mistress Carrie store, where you can get everything from t-shirts, sweatshirts, beanies, koozies, mouse pads, coffee mugs, shot glasses, and more. Just log on to MistressCarrie.com for everything. Okay, I have been waiting for this week's episode. I've been talking a lot about the movie Long Live Rock, Celebrate the Chaos. It premieres Thursday, March 11th at 8 p.m. And this movie is years in the making. The description says it's a deep dive into the culture of hard rock music. The genre is beloved by millions of its fans and is often misunderstood and maligned by media and the music industry. In intimate interviews, the leading titans of rock discuss the genre and the special relationship that they have with their audience. Featuring members of Metallica, Guns N' Roses, Slipknot, Godsmack, Korn, Avenged Sevenfold, Rob Zombie, Five Finger Death Punch, Rage Against the Machine, Greta Van Fleet, Hailstorm, Bush, Fever 333, Beartooth, In This Moment, Papa Roach, and more. It's directed by Jonathan McHugh and produced by Jonathan McHugh, Gary Spivak, and Jonathan Platt. And recently, I had a chance to sit down and talk to director and producer Jonathan McHugh. And he knows music. He's a documentary film director and producer and a music supervisor. But he's also a former label and film executive that had high-ranking A&R and creative and marketing positions at companies like New Line Cinema, Warner Films, Jive Records, Sony Records, Island Def Jam, Universal Records. And he's also been producing and directing a ton of pop culture and musical-based films over the years. He just finished directing a documentary called Cosplay Universe, which you'll hear him talk about in this interview. He's also producing a documentary about Muhammad Ali's history with his hometown called City of Ali. And he's produced over 30 films and TV shows. But at his core, Jonathan McHugh is a rock guy from way back. And he has got some great stories about some of the amazing bands that he saw in his childhood. His mom's from Boston. So when I had a chance to just sit down and talk music with him, I couldn't wait. They sent me an advanced screening of the film, Long Live Rock, Celebrate the Chaos, and every rock fan that sees it is going to love it. Not only am I really excited for you to see the movie, but I'm really excited for you to hear Jonathan's story. So allow me to introduce you to Jonathan McHugh.
Hey, what's up? This is Sully from Godsmack. Strap on those boots, baby, because you are now in the trenches of the war room with the one and only Mistress Carrie right here on the Mistress Carrie podcast.
What's up? This is Joe Rogan, and you're listening to Mistress Carrie.
Her hair so lovely. Pretty eyes.
Hey, this is Brent from Shinedown, and you're listening to Mistress Carrie. Hey, Carrie, go put your bra on, girl.
Hey, this is Steven Tyler, and you be listening to the baddest bitch in Boston, Mistress Carrie.
What's up? This is Aaron from Stain, and you're listening to Mistress Carrie.
Hi, everybody. This is Dave Grohl from the Foo Fighters, and you're listening to the one, the only Mistress Carrie.
Hey, this is David from the band Disturbed, and you're listening to the baddest bitch in Boston, Mistress Carrie.
Hi, Bruce Dickinson here from Iron Maiden. Yes, indeed, Miss Whiplash herself, Mistress Carrie, is here to unchain your brain.
Hi, this is Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. You're listening to Mistress Carrie.
This is Dennis Leary. You are listening to my favorite, Mistress Carrie.
Hey, this is Corey from Stone Sour, and you have the privilege of listening to Mistress Carrie. Oh, God. Oh, yeah.
Jonathan.
How are you, Mistress Carrie?
Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I am so excited about this movie.
Oh, thank you so much. It really is made for the fan, and I know you are one of the biggest fans out there for the last 2-3 decades of this music. And it is, as we say, it's a misunderstood genre. The station that you worked at all those years, AAF, was one of the, I don't want to say only, but one of the top flag wavers of that genre forever. And the people that ran it and did it, and we just salute you guys, because this is really what this movie is, to celebrate this music and these fans. It's really important.
I love the timing of this film. It's called Long Live Rock, Celebrate the Chaos. And the timing of it, literally just last week, marked a year since I had actually been to a live concert. And I haven't had that long of a gap since I was in junior high school.
Yep.
And watching this movie and watching people at a live rock concert the way that we used to do it, up close, personal, sweaty, crowd surfing, moshing, backstage craziness, it made me long for the good old days that were just a year ago.
Sure. And we debated, we've screened this movie on the big screen. We did it at Columbus for our cast and crew. We did it at the Grammy Museum. And, when you've got those good speakers and this thing cranked up, people like jumping out of their seats and just rocking. So it's really kind of frustrating to have this whole virtual world. But the reality is, the movie's coming out on literally the 1-year anniversary of the lockdown. And there's a reason for that people need this. And if we can give that to people, that they can just tide them over until they can get back out there on the field and play, that's what the goal is,
Looking at the list of artists that took part in this movie, it's a who's who of rock, hard rock, heavy metal. How hard was it to make those phone calls to get these artists to be involved? It must have been a one-call thing, right?
For me, who's used to booking interviews, it's, it was amazing to have my producer. And the movie doesn't happen without him, Gary Spivak, who works for Danny Wimmer Presents, books all the shows, whether it was Louder Than Life or back in the day, Rock on the Range, and turned into Sonic Temple and Aftershock. I mean, he's the biggest festival promoter in the country. So safe to say he's got tremendous relationships in this area. And the way we worked it is we just, we would really smartly, we'd set up a trailer in the backstage of these festivals. And he would say, hey, can you give me 15 minutes? Can you give me Tom Morello? Can you give me 15 minutes? And, everybody's sitting around, they have some time, they're doing a bunch of interviews and they're prepping for their set. But it was kind of we knocked it out easily that way. And that otherwise it doesn't happen, because who can afford to go travel to see all these different people and get all these interviews? We would have literally 8 to 10 in one day. And then I would run out on the field and follow our fans, because they were the main storyline. So I was like a chicken with my head cut off, okay, I got to get these interviews. They got to be good. The quality has to be there. Audio, visual, setup's got to be great. Questions got to be prepped. And then I was like, okay, as soon as I'm out, I'm like, okay, got a half-hour break. Let's go to stage 2 and watch this band and follow our fans and talk to them about their experiences, So it was amazing. It was nothing but amazing for me. It was fun.
That's why those festivals are so great for the fans too, because who can afford to go see all of those bands on their own tours? But when you get an opportunity to go to a large festival, you can see all your favorite bands on the same day.
Right. And the value add of that is not only that, but it's what the community does and how they get RVs and they all park together, and they, the mornings are spent making breakfast and hanging out and playing music, and then all walking into the festival together. And, the party crew that's featured in the movie, God bless these guys, G and Scott Prince and everybody, and Jesse and, Andrea. They're just amazing, real folk who just, this is their shit. Like, this is what they do. And they meet up and they go from all these different festivals and they get an RV and they go. And they were our kind of entry into this world. And through them, we met other people like Abby, wheelchair crowd surfs, or Michelle, who wanted to crowd surf on top of her husband. And, these really great characters who you just couldn't write if you're writing a script about this. And they were the heart and soul of our film. Rock stars are amazing. They are good things to talk about, but this film is about the party crew and the fans in general of this genre.
I love the fact that when you decide to make this film, that it's not just about the bands. It's the same kind of conversation I had with myself when I started the Mistress Carrie podcast, that it's not just a rock band podcast, it's a rock lifestyle podcast. And the bands are part of that, obviously, and the people behind the scenes of the music are part of it, but the fans as well. And one thing that I noticed, because you guys sent me the movie a little early so I could check it out, thank you for representing the female rock fans in a major way, because we're out there.
And that was something.
It's so easy to overlook the badass chicks.
No, that was not going to happen on this one, because first of all, this and Rob Zombie talks about it, that rock became a sausage fest, you know what I mean? Like, so I didn't like that about rock, how it became that. And I don't particularly like the heavy screaming and the super annoying guitar. I'm much more of like an alternative guy at my core and a singer-songwriter guy, if you will. But growing up with Metallica and going to see Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath and Kiss when I was a kid in my formative years, there was no other kind of music. It was just this music, right? It was rock music. And then cutting to the 90s, when I work with Metallica, I meet Gary, I get turned on to Rage Against the Machine and Jane's Addiction. And I'm like, and so then 20 years later, Gary's booking these big festivals. And I'm like, Gary, like, the fandom of this thing is like, we should do a film about this, because now I'm making movies, I'm producing movies, I want to direct a film. So we go to Columbus and do this first festival, and we cut together a sizzle reel, and I'm directing another film about the another subculture, about the cosplay culture, which is its own misunderstood, as Miles Kennedy says, island of lost toys, like our genre. And it was like, I didn't know about that genre until I wrote and produced a Snoop Dogg movie. I went to Comic-Con for my first time, and I was like, wait, why are these people dressing up in the summer? Like, this is only supposed to be for Halloween and Mardi Gras, where I went to school in New Orleans, where I learned that. And so you realize that people in the cosplay culture use this music as transition. Like, they try on different personas. Like, boys may dress up in a Alice in Wonderland costume, or girls may dress up as Spider-Man, and it's perfectly accepted. And maybe they go to that next level and they decide, you know what? Inside me, I want to transition. I want to become a different sex. This is what fuels me. So the subculture of rock, I always viewed as misunderstood. I knew what it was. I loved it. But yet you put on get some tattoos, you pierce yourself, you get long hair, you wear all black in the middle of summer, and you're like, wait, these people are freaks too? No, they've got their thing and they're in it. So both of these films in a way are kind of like a 101, introduction 101 into a genre and a subculture. And to show that you can't judge a book by its cover. Just because I'm tatted up, I got purple hair like Mistress Carrie, doesn't mean much. It's just how you express your fandom. And, we were talking earlier about how metal can be calming and it can be soothing. And one of the lines in the movie, this couple, G, who's one of our main, he's the guy who started the party crew. He's like, he meets this woman and she's like, yeah, I got to go to sleep listening to the Black Album. And he goes, I got to marry her, right? Like, what's better than that, right? All of a sudden you have a t-shirt or a statement and you're like, oh, that's my girl. Like, that's my girl right there. Or, oh, you like Metallica? You like Guns N' Roses? You like Rob Zombie? Like, I'm your friend. Like, it's an immediate bonding tool, the music. And it cuts across politics. You don't need to talk about Republican, Democrat. I hate this guy. I hate this guy. I hate this. No, I love this music and this is my stuff. And that's what I love about it. It's a unifier.
You know, growing up in the 80s, like I really learned my love of rock music in the 80s. And back then, there weren't a lot of women represented. You know, there was Joan Jett and there was Lita Ford, and there were definitely female examples. But more often than not, women were in the videos, you know, in Motley Crue's videos and Bon Jovi videos.
Well, they were objectified. They were
yeah.
objectified. And so, I'm sorry, I really didn't answer your question. So let's go back there. Thank you for bringing that up. So, for example, you meet Maria Brink, you meet Lizzie Hale, right? These are strong, empowered females who get up on stage and crush it. And so we interviewed Lizzie at the festival. She came off so good. AJ, her drummer and brother, they talk about their story. I'm like, well, look, this is like a bigger thing for me. So I talked to Bill McGathy, who's the manager I know for a long time. And I said, Bill, I want to go on the road. Like they're doing this tour with all women, right? Hailstorm, in this moment. New Year's Day. Like, I want to go see that show. And so he's like, well, how about San Francisco? I'm like, great. I go to the Warfield. We interview Lizzie. She lets me come to this in-store she's doing at Amoeba, right? Where we meet this fan who says, you know, she's, I don't know, teen, whatever. And she says, I wanted to save myself to go to my first show to be a Hailstorm show because I feel Lizzie so much as a person. And that was a beautiful moment to be part of. You know what I mean? To see that with Lizzie and to meet Lizzie's super fan, Dave, who's been to 80 Hailstorm shows, and talk to Maria Brink about how she, and then the super fan segment about one of my fans, Abby, whose favorite artist, Maria Brink, and tattooed her lyrics on her arm, and who, you know, got a shout out from Maria Brink, and she gave her, you know, bullhorn that she uses, or dunce cap, whatever that thing's called. And to see that passionate fan of Abby talking about, oh my God, her lipstick's on it. Like, come on, man, that's so beautiful. So the women in rock had to be talked about. And obviously in people like Tom Morello and Fever 333, you know, seeing minorities out there rocking, it's like super important to show, yes, it's not exactly a rainbow coalition because it's mostly a white male dominated genre, but yet there's all sorts of things coming up and different genre, different people that are being represented. And we have to talk about that in the film because it's super important in our world today. So yeah, females in rock, I love it, you know.
It's something that comes up on the podcast a lot, especially in the last year since losing AAF and trying to keep this really super passionate Northeast rock scene together, which is one of the reasons why I launched the podcast. It comes up a lot, and I say it all the time. Who would have thought that the world could learn lessons from the rock community about being open-minded, about inclusion, about representation? Because at the end of the day, the most we want to argue about is like top 5 guitar players of all time. And you want to, you know, swap stories about that show or this show and what album and the songs. And I mean, if Tom Morello and Ted Nugent can be friends, the rock community can do anything.
That's a good point. Because Ted's become pretty extreme. He was actually, my first concert ever was Kiss. And you'll appreciate that. And that's Coliseum. Second concert, Providence Civic Center. Ted Nugent opening for Aerosmith, the Kings of Boston. Third concert, Led Zeppelin. So those are my big 3. Fourth concert, Black Sabbath. That's how I was indoctrinated into the world. But yeah, Ted has become a pretty extreme. I can't exactly say I'm a fan anymore.
It's really interesting to hear Morello, even just recently on Stern, talking about how there's still a way for those guys to be able to connect on a music level. And it's amazing that rock music in general, that while we are viewed to be kind of on the fringe, we're way more open-minded and welcoming than pretty much any other genre or style of music.
Yeah, I agree.
Do you agree that rock music and the fandom and the community of rock, that the longevity is there more for rock artists than any other genre?
Oh, absolutely. Andy Gould, who managed Zombie forever, talks about in the film going to his first Judas Priest concert and how he remembered like the father and the son and, and the grandfather being together. And I think that, as I've turned another great analogy was, my son grew up in California, but his number one team is the New York Yankees because I grew up in New York and I indoctrinated him into it, right? So
the dark side.
He likes rock music, but yet he loves all these other genres of music. And so I think that through the generations, it stood the test of time better than most because it is something it's got a thing to it, right? Where pop music is disposable, hip hop has got a thing to it too. But as it becomes more pop, it loses that, whereas rock, and Zombie really says it well in the film. He's like, I don't want to be on the morning shows talking about how rock is dead. Like rock is our thing. It's like our thing. We don't want to necessarily be mainstream because if you become too mainstream, you lose your brand. And the example of that is fashion. So you look at, I remember this brand, it was a hip hop street brand called Cross Colors, and Cross Colors went right from like being a street brand to being mass merch and died. And it went, the big company went bad, so the problem is once you go mass merch, you can't come back. They talk about it in the estate business. Like you got to start boutique and build and build and build because once you go mass merch, you're done. So rock never went mass merch in a way. It always kind of maintained that really nice lane. And I think that keeps it so that people don't go, yeah, I'm over that band. They got too popular, right? It's that thing.
When a band just,
and you look at Metallica, the fan base that they have made, kept, built, it's like nothing other to me. Like they're probably one of the greatest brands of all time who just maintain purity. You know what I mean? And the closest they ever came is Enter Sandman. They made what could be conceived as a hit song in the rock world, but they never went back and did it again. They went back to the core base and just kept doing it. So, and they're the stalwarts, man. They're the godfathers of the game, if you will. I mean, there's many of them also, but Slayer is another great example, right, of really maintaining purity. And Rick Sales did an amazing job with them as a manager of that band, So
it cracks me up that the fashion of these metal shirts over the last few years, that like when you see a Kardashian wearing a Slayer shirt and it hits the internet and it's like, what the fuck?
But it's just an example of how cool they kept their brand, right? Slayer and Metallica mean dangerous, and certain hip hop has maintained a brand of certain danger. And then the mainstream, aka Kardashian, I want a piece of that. How do I get a piece of that? Well, let me put on a Slayer or Metallica t-shirt, right? It's like an immediate brander. Like you see, what's the show? Billions, right? The guy who's in the head of, Axe, who Axe is the star of the show, right? He's a rocker. And he has this Metallica thing. He actually goes to a Metallica show in the show and he wears a Metallica t-shirt. It says something about him. He doesn't give a fuck, right? And it's a character piece for him. So it's just interesting to think about the psychology of it and how the brands have stayed together, so well because they haven't gone mainstream. And that's why the credo of rock is dead comes up, because it's not mainstream and it really doesn't want to be mainstream. And, the beauty of a new band like Greta Van Fleet, right? So I'm a guy who saw Led Zeppelin. I'm a guy who's Led Zeppelin is still to this day.
I was going to ask you about that because the idea of seeing Led Zeppelin in concert is like, oh.
Right. So it's still my favorite band to this day because that experience, I'll just tell you a quick sidebar of that story. So I just did an interview today for the Staten Island Advance, right? Which is a paper I grew up as a paper boy, right? So in 1977, Led Zeppelin announces they're coming to Madison Square Garden. And I have like $300 in paper out money in the bank. And I go to the bank and I say, put it all into a money order and write it to Madison Square Garden. Because there's a lottery for Led Zeppelin tickets. I'm like 13 years old or something. And every day I'm checking the mail, right? And one day my mother says, you got a package. And I go to the front table and there is a package from Madison Square Garden. And I open it up and there is, I want to say 16 tickets to Led Zeppelin. Like whatever I could afford, I bought like 3 different nights, right? So I'm like, holy shit, I'm Willy Wonka. I got the golden tickets. And I go to school that next day and I say, you know, my core Led Zeppelin crew, we're going to the show and the people are freaking the fuck out. And then the word gets out, McHugh's got Led Zeppelin tickets, right? And so then there's a guy who's in the, Robert Begley's his name. And he's the Robert Plant impersonator. He has a band. They play Zeppelin covers. They're great. And I go, Begley, are you going to Zeppelin? He goes, no, man, I didn't get a ticket. And I pull out a ticket and I said, we're going to the fucking show. And he starts crying, right? And so, and then like there was a couple extra tickets and people were like, dude, I'll give you 2-3 times your money. And I'm like, wait a second. So I get my tickets paid for. And I realized, wait, there's a business here somehow. So I sell a couple tickets to pay for my tickets and my friends' tickets. And then when I get to college radio in New Orleans, I become the ticket guy. And I realized, wait, there's a business here? Like I could actually get into the music business. And that's what I sprung board that college radio experience into getting into promotion of radio promotion for record companies. So like you think about Led Zeppelin popped a light bulb in my head, which took me to college radio, which took me into the business. And it's just a weird thing I've never really talked about, but it kind of makes sense. So, okay, now back to Greta Van Fleet. Someone says, I'm doing a show on the Sunset Strip. And I run into a friend of mine in line at the Viper Room. I'm like, what are you doing? And they're like, I'm going to see Greta Van Fleet. And I say, who's she? Right? And they go, no, it's a band. I'm like, oh, okay. So next time
it's a woman, but it's a band too. Yeah.
Right. So next time they come through, Gary and I go, my partner, and I'm having trouble with it because he's so affected. He's got all the Robert Plant moves. And I'm like, yeah, this is too much for me. Like, and then I go see him another time at an outdoor theater in LA. And there's all these girls up front. And yet they're with their fathers and their fathers are loving it. And the girls up front are like, oh my God, they're so sexy. And I'm like, oh, okay. So they're bringing girls back to rock. Yeah, he's a little too close for me. But when you interview him, and then we interviewed him and I realized his father brought him up on blues in Detroit, in Michigan. And they were just great kids who grew up on blues. And you kind of got to get past it. You know what I mean? Because it is the greatest rock band of all time. So, okay, if you're a little affected by it and imitating a tiny bit or giving it an homage, if you will, so be it. And their music is evolving. And one of the producers and coordinators on this movie is 24 years old and she loves them. And so we had the conversation the other day about their new music. And I was like, what do you think? She goes, I love it. And I said, yeah, it feels like an evolution from the first record. And so they're going to continue to grow and get better and better and better. And again, if they bring women back to the genre, God bless them. Keep on going.
I think Dirty Honey's doing the same thing as well.
Dirty Honey's great. Mark
they're one of those,
band, right?
Yeah. That they're one of those bands that it's like, if you're a bunch of kids and your dad's playing you blues, you're going to get inspired the same way that Led Zeppelin got inspired by those same blues artists. I talked to the Royal Blood guys a couple weeks ago about this, about how rock and roll keeps inspiring itself over the pond. That the blues got sent overseas and then the British band sent it back and then we sent it back. And it's like we're playing this ping pong over the ocean to see what we can turn rock and roll into based on the inspiration.
Sure.
To go back to Led Zeppelin, just because I don't know very many people that actually saw them in concert. You're a 13-year-old kid at Madison Square Garden, most popular kid in school now because you figured out the racket of buying tickets.
No. By the way, amongst the rock crowd only. Remember, this is still Led Zeppelin is a very popular band, and rock is more popular than when it was today. But still, you remember what happens at that time. Disco happens. I mean, even before disco, so to speak. But remember, it is still a certain class of people. So I'm not the most popular kid. I am certainly the most popular kid. No, I mean,
amongst your friends, you're the king right now.
Yeah. For the moment, I'm good. I got the ticket.
Yeah. And you walk into that arena. Everybody listening to this has been to a rock concert. I want to hear what your experience was like going to see Led Zeppelin as a teenager in 1977. What do you remember that the whether it be the songs that you still hear that remind you of that show? If I had the DeLorean, I would go back and see that band.
I'll tell you two things. They played for 3.5 hours. Okay. The only time I was able to leave my seat, I had to leave my seat, and I kind of planned it out, was during John Bonham's 20-minute drum solo from Moby Dick, right? I was like, all right, this is going to be the time. I know I'm not going to miss anything except Bonzo crushing it, and I could take 5 minutes off for that. So I remember the only time leaving my seat, because just in rapture, right? In that show, some fucking idiot threw an M80, which is a severe firecracker, shall we say, powerful firecracker.
It's like a 16th of a stick of dynamite, isn't it?
Yeah, and it hits Jimmy Page and blows up on stage. And Jimmy Page walks off, he fucking freaked out, and he luckily wasn't too injured. It walks off the stage, and the band keeps playing, as I recall, and it's rock and roll, right? Like I'm a hockey player. I take a hit, I keep going, right? And or maybe they stopped. I don't quite remember, but I do remember that. And that was a traumatic moment. Like, is the show gonna stop? I don't remember if it did stop or not, but it's just the euphoria. And I went, I think, 2 or 3 nights to the show. But I will tell you the more memorable rock and roll moment for me was seeing Kiss, Blue Oyster Cult, and Leslie West from Mountain. That was my first show ever at the Nassau Coliseum. And, we don't have cars, so we take a bus to the ferry, Staten Island ferry to Manhattan, subway to Penn Station, and then the train, the LIRR to Hempstead. And then we, I guess, take a cab to the show. We get there, we wait online. There is, it's a general admission show, if you remember those. And the doors open, and guess what? There's a fucking stampede. And my Puerto Rican buddy, Chicky was his name at the time, I remember. He gets sandwiched against the glass. This is a firm memory. He gets sandwiched against the glass of the door, and he's like, the mob is rolling by him. And I grab my friend's hand, and I say, grab my hand to my friend, my next door neighbor, who's like a 300-pound football player, 200-pound football. And I grab Chicky's hand, and I grab Chicky, I get his hand, and I grab his arm, and I grab his arm, and I literally like piecemeal like a rope, and I pulled Chicky in. So we get in, we're, I don't know, 30, 40 people from the front on the floor. And it's like 3:00 in the afternoon. The show starts at 8, 9 o'clock, whatever. My friend, people are smoking weed. My friend James Monroe, the first guy I ever got high with, faints, okay? Through whatever, not enough water, too much drug intake, I don't even know. So I remember that being traumatic. Show's unbelievable, right? All the 3 bands crush it. Kiss is the pyrotechnic. I've been a fan of this band, and I'm just like, you get to see this shit come to life, and it's like unbelievable, the show they put on. Show ends, it's after midnight. You get out of the Nassau Coliseum. Now I'm sorry, I didn't tell you. This is New Year's Eve, 75, 76, right?
Wow.
It's New Year's Eve. It's New Year's Eve. It's sleeting out. There's no cabs. So we start walking the 2 miles to Hempstead to get the train. Except that, guess what? The last train on New Year's Eve was 1 a.m. And the show ended at like 12:30 because they wanted to have New Year's on the show. So we get to Hempstead. It's whatever, 3:30 in the morning. The only place open, now it's snowing by now, right? We're soaked to the bone. The only place open is the police station. Right? Everybody's still probably holding some drugs, right? We go into the police station and there's 10 other people in the same situation sitting on the floor of the police station because there's no train till 6 a.m. And we literally just get a spot on the floor and we wait until the sun comes up. And my mother, when I got home at 8 a.m., was so furious, right? She took away my bank book. You can't go do things like this anymore. You're too young. And that was kind of my indoctrination to rock and roll from there. So
it's such a foreign concept of like no cell phones to call your mom, no Uber to be able to get back, no way to like if you think about it now, that you're a teenager on New Year's Eve trapped at the police station and you can't get home. Today, that's like the plot of a film because anybody under the age of 30 can't even fathom a world without a smartphone and Uber, and it just doesn't make any sense.
Right. So I thought, okay, do I do a collect call to my mother at 3:30 in the morning from the police station payphone booth, or pretend maybe she's sleeping and maybe I can get back because my mother was a writer, as I told you, right? So she would stay up all night writing and sleep during the day. She was like a vampirist, right? And so the question is, well, maybe she won't miss me. You know what I mean? But it didn't work out that way. So
kids are so stupid. Maybe my mom won't notice I'm not home on New Year's Eve when she knows I was at a Kiss show.
The In Search of rock and roll, like the power of rock and roll, what that will do to people to make them do shit like crowd surf and mosh and stage dive and stay out all night in Long Island when you live, hours from there. It's just funny. I haven't thought about that in so long. So thank you for helping to spark that memory because it's a great one.
The closest I ever came to dying in any kind of mosh pit or whatever, and I remember thinking to myself, I can't die at this show. I was in college, and a bunch of us went out to what used to be Riverside Park out in Agawam, which is now Six Flags, and they used to do outdoor concerts. And it was the Spin Doctors, Soul Asylum, and the Screaming Trees. And when the Spin Doctors played Two Princes, a mosh pit broke out, which was completely unexpected. And now I'm getting pinned against the barricade. And I just remember going, I can't die at a Spin Doctors concert.
No, that is not a good look.
I wasn't worried about dying. I was worried about where.
That's funny because you do not put Spin Doctors and mosh pit in the same sentence normally.
No, it was ridiculous. And then the only other time that I came close, I was about 15 rows from the front at the old Foxborough Stadium on that Guns N' Roses Metallica co-headlining tour with Faith No More. And it was 5 days after the Montreal riot when James Hetfield had been burned. So his arm was in a sling and his roadie was playing guitar. And unlike Jimmy Page with an M80, somebody hit Axl with a rose, like an actual flower when he was sitting behind the piano. And he stormed off stage. And everybody in the crowd was like, here we go again. Oh, shit. And I remember I was standing next to a member of the Patriots. I can't remember who it was, but he was like an old lineman from the Patriots. So he was just a mountain of a human being. And he just looks down and he goes, if the shit hits the fan, stay with me. And I was
I'll block for you. That's great.
Yes, sir.
That's encouraging. That's encouraging.
No problem. But you look back at those memories and it's like that harrowing experience for you on New Year's Eve where like how screwed up are rock fans that we look back at those scary, crazy, troublesome moments with such fondness.
Well, it's funny. I haven't thought about that, but the Stampede was scary as fuck at the moment. Was super scary, and James Monroe was like my big brother, and him fainting and me having to take care of him. Those were scary moments. And the show hadn't even started yet. You know what I'm saying? So
there's a reason why they don't have GA shows like that anymore for that reason.
Yeah, it's a dumb idea. You just open the doors and let people all run in at the same time. Who thought of that? And it was before the Who thing, whatever that was, Cincinnati, whatever that was, where people actually died. You could literally die. So yeah, I don't know. It's an obsession, rock and roll, and it's a beautiful, and that's why this movie, we just wanted to celebrate it, in today's moment. And little did we know that you're making a moment in time, right? Like they're crowd surfing, all this stuff, moshing, even festivals. Like you can't take it for granted. It's always going to be there. Like your radio station, right? Your AIF was like, for granted, that station was always going to be there rocking. But there's nothing that lasts forever. And so you always have to take stock in that and realize that things, change and morph and, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. But, we wanted to celebrate the genre, and Gary and I have been friends for 20 years since we worked. We were responsible for part of the team. Metallica, Enter Sandman was a #1 rock record, right? You guys were crushing it. You guys played it every couple hours like it was like a top 40 rotation. But pop radio would not play Metallica, even though the record was in the grooves and it was a hit. The stigma of playing Metallica was just unheard of.
Well, rock radio was slow to play Metallica before that. I mean, until One came out, Metallica made their name off of people dubbing cassettes and passing it around and, hey, check this out. I mean, I remember being in high school and loving, the Bon Jovis and the Queensryches and, all of that stuff. And when I heard Metallica, it was like, whoa, that's dangerous. That's
the real shit. Yeah.
Yeah. Like it's gritty and scary and underground. And every guy I know that liked rock music, was like, yeah, this is a little scary. You go to the show and you didn't know what to expect. I mean, it was dangerous, and radio stations didn't know what to do with it back then.
Well, try top 40 radio. Like, we had to do some, I'll tell you, if you have, I don't know what our timing is, but I'll give you one quick sidebar Metallica story. So we were, as radio promotion people, we were in charge of trying to get radio stations to play this record, right? Top 40 radio stations. So there was one guy in Rapid City, South Dakota, who used to be in California, had a lot of friends in top 40 radio, and they would listen to him. He was like the A&R guy for records. And if he said play it, they would play it, a lot of his friends. So I said, Bob, you got to play Metallica, man. This Enter Sandman record. He goes, man, I can't play that record. I go, what do you mean? He goes, you're in South Dakota, man. People like to rock out there. Isn't that where Sturgis is, the bike rally? And like, he's like, yeah, I can't play it. And so I beat on week after week after week. And one day, so he was also an independent film fan, and we would talk films, like, common bonding, whatever. And one day he said to me, I said, Bob, what is it going to take? Like, can we do like a flyaway and bring some fans to see a show or something, like to connect the dots a little bit better? He said, I'll tell you what. He's like, off the cuff. He goes, I'll tell you, this is when Harry Met Sally, the film, was out, right? I'll tell you what, you get me an autographed Harry Met Sally script, I'll play the record. Click. And I'm like, fuck, what am I going to do? How am I supposed to do that?
Somebody get Billy Crystal on the phone.
So all of a sudden I go, wait a second. I'm in the office building where Rob Reiner's office is down the hall. And I'm like, I see Rob Reiner in the commissary all the time. And I don't know him. I don't talk to him. I grew up watching All in the Family. And obviously I'm a big fan. Spinal Tap, the guy made Spinal Tap, So I'm thinking to myself, all right. And now I work at Elektra Records. Elektra Records has one of the greatest catalogs of all time. Not only do we have Metallica, we have The Cure, we have Jackson Browne, we have, oh my God, I'm blanking on a bunch of stuff. We have some of the greatest rock bands in history, right? Because David Geffen Asylum was Elektra. So Eagles, we got like the greatest shit of all time. So I walk in their office with a box of CDs. And the receptionist says, hi, can I help you? And I was like, I don't know, maybe. And I explained the story to her. She goes, what do you got there? I show her what I got. And she goes, oh, I love this band. I love that. I love that. And she goes, so she gets on the phone, she calls Rob's assistant. And Rob's assistant comes out, and I tell her the story. And she goes, what do you got there? And I go, oh, so she takes a couple CDs and she goes, I'll tell you what, Rob's be back from lunch. Now I know Rob is at lunch down the hall, right? At the Maple, what was it called? Maple Drive restaurant. And so Rob walks in from lunch, and he walks right by me and just keeps going. And his assistant comes out. He goes, she waves at me. She goes, come here. So she goes, you got 5 minutes. And so I go in Rob's office and I tell him the tale. And he looks, there's some CDs in the box, another box for Rob. And he goes, oh, I love this band. I love that band. Who's this band? He said, well, tell me about this band. I tell him about the Cure or whatever it was. He didn't know. And he goes, all right, I got you. So what's this guy? He goes, did he say who had to autograph the script? And I said, no. So he goes, you don't need Billy Crystal. You don't need Meg Ryan. And I go, he never said, we never talked about it. So he gets a pen, goes to the cadet, the shelf, pulls down a script, and he goes, what's the guy's name? And I said, it's Bob. And he goes, Bob, play the fucking record, Rob. And he hands me the script. So I'm like, oh my God. So I FedEx the script to Rapid City, South Dakota. And I happen to be going to New York the next day to work in New York, the corporate office. The pressure is on to get this record played and move it up the top 40 chart. And my boss is like, so I tell him, we're going to get the ad. And he goes, Monday comes, he goes, where's the ad? They didn't call it in. And he goes, get the guy on the phone and get the ad. I call, he doesn't pick up the phone. I call. It's Monday. It's Monday night. And I say, well, I know the guy's on the air. So I get the request line. I call information for Rapid City, South Dakota. I get the request line. I call the request line. I just fucking keep hitting it over and over. Hours. Finally, a guy picks up. And it's Bob. And I know his voice. And I say, he goes, hi, what do you want to hear? I said, I'd like to hear Metallica, Enter Sandman. And he goes, is this McHugh? I said, Bob, what are you doing to me, man? I'm in the office. Like, I might get fired because you told me something. And he goes, how did you do that? I said, Bob, that's not important. What's important is that you be a man of your word and you do what you say you're going to do. And he says, McHugh, he goes, I can't play that record. I go, tell me why you can't play that record. He goes, the stigma of Metallica, my bosses will just come down on me. I said, I'll tell you what, Rob, I got it. Do me a favor. Just put the record on. Don't tell people who it is. Don't back announce it. Just play the record and see if you get any phones. And so that's what happened. He put the record on at night without what we call white labeling it. Didn't tell anybody who it was. Didn't back announce it. Phone started lighting up. And the following week, he was forced to add the record. And I didn't get fired. So, that's the kind of shit that it took just to get a record on the radio because of the stigma of Metallica. And as crazy as it sounds, that's the way it was.
Meathead from All in the Family. And when Harry Met Sally gets Metallica on top 40 radio. It's the most ludicrous rock and roll story ever, which is what makes it so beautiful.
Exactly. It'll be in the book.
One of the other things I loved about the film, and I thought it was really powerful, is when Ice-T talked about the energy in the mosh pit coming from the rap world and his experience with body count and what it's like to be on stage at a rock show. And now that rap has really ingrained itself in so many ways in rock, when you talk about Rage or Fever 333 or Linkin Park or any of these newer artists that were equally inspired by the legends in rock, but also the legends of hip hop, having somebody like him say, it's the craziest thing I've ever seen is a mosh pit like that stands out for me in the movie.
To me, he's one of the most interesting characters of like the whole 20th century, because here's a guy comes up in the hood, goes to live with his cousin who's a rock guy, gets totally inspired by him, and can just be this top rapper who's dangerous and gets banned by Warner Brothers. But yet this body count thing is so important to him that he keeps it going and becomes not only a rap headliner, but a rock headliner with body count. And then he goes on to have this successful TV career, and it's just really a true indication. And part of it is because he embraced both crowds, right? He embraced the rap fan. He embraced the rock fan. So his TV Q, think about it, is double, right? TV Q is an expression meaning that they know you on TV and they like you, right? So here's a guy that appeals to both genres because his heart is telling him, hey, yeah, I'm black, but I like to rock. My cousin taught me about rock and I'm fucking into it. And it's really just an interesting thing.
And then he ends up on TV playing a cop.
Right, exactly. after after the whole controversy. It's a beautiful story. It would actually make a great biopic. He really is a great story, and he's had the same manager the whole time. George Hinojosa is like beautiful, like the way they've done together. It's fantastic.
What do you think it is about? I mean, I remember fighting this battle at AAF for years of the argument that, like you're talking about with Top 40, about rock being too scary for certain advertisers, right? And so, like, when you talk about losing rock stations the way that we lost AAF, part of the reason is, you got to be able to show the radio companies that they can make money in advertising off of a format like rock. But if you've got people that don't understand and don't respect the fan base, the passion, the loyalty, it's this really hard razor edge to balance on, because you and I both know, and we talked about it, the loyalty of the rock audience, that when they love something, they love it. And if you're loyal to them, I used to call, we're like the junkyard dogs, that we're loyal, we're there, but don't cross us.
And that's the sellout part of music. And it's a sellout part of, it really mostly exists in music. And that's what Rob Zombie and Lars talk about, that they basically just maintain the core. And if you do anything too cheesy, too poppy, your people are going to try to rip you down. Like, they're not feeling it. And that's why it's a word's not pedigree, but it's a situation where you stay true to your core, and you serve the core. And the downside of that is you can't break out of the box. You can't be mainstream, because if you have a hit, and the examples of those things are you talk about the Spin Doctors or the Blues Travelers, right? They're jam bands. They start as jam bands. But if they had a hit, like Blues Traveler had a couple hits, I worked with Blues Traveler at A&M, then all of a sudden they're not as popular than the jam band culture. They can't get booked anymore like they used to get booked, because they're pop bands now. And Taylor Swift experienced that with country, right? She arrives from a country star to a pop star. And then the question is, can she still get played at country radio now that she's a pop star? So this happens in most other genres, but rarely ever in rock, because they stay in their lane. And it's just an interesting thing. I mean, Motley Crue, example of a band that had hits. There's certain rock bands that have hits and they cross over into pop. But but we talk about Slayer, we talk about Rick Sales, we talk about Cliff Bernstein and Peter Mensch, and how they manage Metallica and how they know exactly keep into your lane, branch out here, but you can't branch out here. You can't go too far. You can't do a record with Taylor Swift, right? You can't do it. So it's interesting. It's psychology. It's the passion of the fandom. It's keeping pure to your base. And AAF made that decision. We're going to play this music, and we're going to stay true to the core. But again, that doesn't play well in the advertising world, which keeps your station on the air. So it's a blessing and a curse, I think.
Do you think that rock music, especially stations like AAF, the more of them that we lose, do you think rock is being kind of driven back underground, especially now with the technology we have, like my podcast, where the rock fans are out there, obviously. And when we're allowed to go to concerts again, it's like you can see the bodies, the traffic jams trying to get into the venues, the amount of money that people are spending. But do you think that's where the future of rock is that it's going to have to kind of go back underground to a certain point because of how mainstream the big media companies are becoming, where rock may not have a seat at the table the way that it used to? I mean, the argument with the Rock Hall and all this kind of stuff, not that it's dead, but is it being driven back underground a little bit?
Well, I think that in the commercial nature of every individual station having to fight for local advertising, I think that's the genius of a concept like Sirius XM, right? Where I listen to predominantly Sirius XM. Because why? I want to rock, I go to Octane, I listen to Jose. I want some singer-songwriter, I go to the Spectrum. I want some new alternative music, I go to Alternative Nation, right? There's something for everybody there. And the idea of having a national outlet that have specialized people like the Jose's of the world that do Octane and have real programmers that understand these genres and what they are. And if I want to hear Tom Petty or the Foo Fighters station, you know what I mean? So they're a really good alternative that have come along to make sure that people get served. And I think that will keep it not, going underground, but it's like I said, it's not mainstream in the sense of some of these pop ditties that you hear or mainstream hip hop records. They're just not. When you hear a guy fucking, like I listened to this band, The Architects, the other day, right? Eddie Trunk was talking about it, and Eddie's in my movie also. So I was like, all right, I hadn't heard it. I put it on, and the first thing you hear, the guy screaming, right? And then I'm like, all right, well, I'm not in the mood for screaming, but you know what? I let it play, and he starts to sing, and it's a really good record, But that off-putting nature of what hard rock can be, is not for everybody. And that's just it. It's an acquired taste, right? Sometimes I'm in the mood to fucking rock. I'm always in the mood for Rage Against the Machine. I'm always in the mood for Metallica. I'm always in the mood for Led Zeppelin. But some of this other stuff that I'm experiencing and checking out, and I'm always in the mood for Greta Van Fleet because that music feels a little bit more mainstream to me, if you will. Mainstream rock, not the harder edge rock. So it's just it's an acquired taste, and it's different strokes for different folks, really.
You and Gary working together for so many years and working some of the biggest rock records and putting together some of the biggest festivals and biggest tours. Can you imagine doing that and having the artists and all of those experiences being able to be documented the way that bands and fans can document things with social media and smartphones? When you go back and think of the things that rock used to do, and there's no evidence.
Right. And then think about it. I'll tell you another thing. This movie, like you watch movies like Heavy Metal Parking Lot, right? Which is really just a dude with a video camera outside a Judas Priest show in the parking lot. That's what the movie is, right? But yet this movie is revered, okay? The other movie that gets talked about in that context is Western Civ 2. Penelope Spears, great filmmaker. Otherwise, you can't count movies about the hard rock. Metallica movies, they're great documentaries. But as far as a genre film, so part of my thought process was, wait a second, if those movies still get talked about 20, 25, 30 years later, why can't we make one that shows where we're at today with the genre, and maybe 30 years from now, people could be watching that movie? That's like something that you want to leave something behind. And after, music supervising 80 movies and producing 30 others, to have my first movie come out that means something to a group of people, that means a lot to me. And I think that's why one of the reasons I wanted to make this movie, and I know Gary did too, because Gary, much like me, is an alternative guy, loving alternative music. Gary used to run alternative radio departments at labels, and then kind of fell into this genre. And he would get shit from his friends, like, why are you fucking in that rock shit? And so Gary, like, well, fuck you. Gary's that kind of guy. Like, I'll show you. I'm going to have festivals that have booked 70, 80,000 people.
That's the perfect rock response.
Yeah.
Fuck you, I'll show you. Like, that's the core of it.
Yeah, McHugh, that movie idea you had, fucking let's go do it. We'll fund it ourselves if we have to. And that's what we did. We booked our first shows. I paid for my cinematographer's plane ticket to Columbus, Ohio, and Gary put up some money to book some crew, and we just shot. And I, paid for my editor. Like, let's see what we can build. Let's put on a show. Let's do it. So it comes from the purest place, and that's what I think is cool. And I think that's going to resonate with the fans because it's made by fans for fans.
When I saw the announcement about the movie and I saw the trailer, I knew immediately that it was an homage, and it's a statement that no, we're all good. Fuck everybody else if they don't think we're cool. We know we're cool. And this movie represents you, not a character version of you, but it's really you from a respectful position. And watching it, I felt that feeling of going to a show and of belonging. And it made me feel so good. And at the same time, it made me miss going to shows so much because The last show that I went to was Bush in Vegas at the House of Blues. And I even told Chris Trainer this from the band. I was like, if I had known that was going to be the last show I was going to see for a fucking year, I would have had another drink. I would have sang more. I would have lived in the moment more because I was taking it for granted that I could just go to another show the next week.
Well, because your whole life, as a media personality, you've gotten tickets to shows. And, hey, if you got to buy a ticket here or there, whatever, it's okay. We make money. That's what we make money for. So, yeah, absolutely. You take things for granted, and you can't in this world. Life is too short. I mean, COVID killing 500,000 people in our country in 1 year. That's fucking serious business. And, everything should be not taken for granted. Your family, your passions, your time, you just don't know how long you have to do the things you want to do and be with the people you want to be with. And it's a wake up call in a way to step back and like look at things and really think about things. So yeah, as an homage, 100%, that's what this movie is. And that's what it's meant to be. And, it's not like we did it to make money because we've been working for 2 years without getting paid. So the bottom line is, it's a karmic thing, and we're happy we were able to get it out there. And thank you for all the bands for participating and giving us your music, and for the rates you gave it to us for, and for all the people that worked on this movie, the crew, the fans, the party crew. We couldn't have done it without you. So if you're listening to this is all about you.
And you're going to be able to see that when you watch the movie. There's the link to the film. There's an events calendar on mistresscarrie.com. The movie poster's up there. The link to get the passes to watch the film is up there. After the premiere, because it's March 11th at 8 p.m., after the premiere, what are the plans for the film?
Sure. So the film basically, starting on the 12th, goes to what's called virtual cinema. And, there's a number of movie theaters like festivals and venues are crushed. They're dead. So the idea of going to, there's a platform called Eventive, and you'll get it through longliverockmovie.com. And you can pick a cinema that you want to support, and you can watch the movie through that platform. And then there'll be other bands and other people like Mistress Carrie that you can go to their site and just continue to watch the movie. After that, we're negotiating with a couple of other different platforms, but odds are it's Amazon and iTunes who can, you can rent the movie there. So it's an interesting thing because it's not like it's all set in stone. It's not like Netflix is going to come going, oh my God, I love this genre, I'm going to put this on. It's not going to happen, right? We're the poor bastard stepchildren of the film business. And so there'll be ways to find it. You can watch it, but like anything else good, you got to find it. You got to go look for it. You got to find it. So longliverockmovie.com will have all the information of where, when, and how to find it. But, and just, look, it's all about spreading the word like you're doing, Mistress Carrie. The fans out there, please spread the word, because otherwise you can't make another movie like this and it won't be successful. And we got a lot of people to pay back who helped, who believed in the movie. And we thank them for that, the investors and the producers who helped step up and make this movie. So let's pay them back so we can make another one. Because here's the other thing. The other thing I didn't do, Carrie, I really wanted this to be an international movie. But guess what? I didn't have the money to go to some of those amazing rock festivals where it all started, really, where the Braveheart started, where these monsters of rock and these things started, and where rock is huge in places like Germany and France and the South America. So the goal would be you make Long Live Rock 2, the international version. But again, if this is successful, well, why not? We'll go do that. I'm down.
I went a couple years ago to Romania, and I saw Judas Priest in Bucharest. And I had never gone to a rock concert outside of the United States. And I just happened to be there. My husband's in the military and he was over there. And so I was like, all right, well, I'm going to go over there. Why don't I go on Polestar and see who's going to be in Romania while I'm there in case I can find a band that's good. And I was like, oh my God, Judas Priest is going to be there. I called the record company and I'm like, hey, can you guys help me get some tickets to see Judas Priest on this date? And they were like, Carrie, the band's not even in Boston that day. They're in Bucharest. I was like, I know, I'm going to be in Bucharest. The experience of going to see Judas Priest in Romania, it took over all of downtown Bucharest. Generations of families, all with the shirts on. You could tell people walking down the street, oh, they're going to the show. They're going to the show. They're going to the show. And to watch 3 generations of metal fans watch Judas Priest For anybody that's never traveled outside of the United States, it's a whole other level of passion in places like Japan and Germany and Brazil when it comes to the passion and loyalty for rock as a genre. So you making a movie like this.
We were lucky enough, again, before everything shut down, we were lucky enough to do a cast and crew screening in Columbus for just fans jumping out of their seats. I was invited to Estonia, right, in Eastern Europe, another rocking country, to screen the movie at a festival there. And that was beautiful to see this, an international audience respond to the movie as they did. And then we were able to screen it for the Grammy Museum just in February, literally February 6th, a month before it all shut down. So I got to see a little bit of film festival. I could have played a lot more. We had one in Greece lined up and that didn't work, and, a couple others. But, I got to see it a little bit outside of the country once and at some theaters, and that was good. But yeah, it's look, everybody's frustrated. The things they didn't get. My daughter didn't get high school graduation. My daughter didn't get prom. She didn't get first semester college. A lot of people are making sacrifices, and it is what it is. And just look, I'm happy. Like I said, if it can brighten up a couple people's day, God bless.
It brightened mine. It made me so kind of homesick, but also it kind of reminded me of how good things can be and how it gave me something to look forward to when we can all go back and start going to shows again. And it sounds
that's why we're putting it out
getting
now.
There. Yeah, that sounds like we're getting there. People tell me all the time I should write a book, but you need to write a book with some of the stories you have too.
Yeah, I'm working on it. It's just another thing to put on the list that I've been working on for a number of years to do it. But making these movies is time consuming. Like I said, my day job is music supervising film and TV shows. And I also teach. I love teaching. So yeah, whatever it takes to make a living, because documentary films is not quite going to get it done quite yet, but maybe someday.
And you got the writing stuff in your DNA. And quickly before I let you go, your mom, you told me, is from Boston. So you spent a lot of time here, even though you're, a fan of the Evil Empire as a Yankees fan, that you spent a lot of time in Boston. Do you have a typical Boston memory you want to share before you go?
Oh my God, there's so many of them. I mean, one of my first memories, period, is with my uncle going to the beach in I want to say it's not Revere. It's further up north. My grandmother lived in Revere. My mother grew up in Roxbury.
Like Nantasket?
Yeah, I forget the town. But anyway, they basically said, the water's very cold here. There's this thing called the Labrador Current. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. I just jump in the water and I'm my teeth are chattering, and they buy me a red ball to get my mind off how cold I am. Then another great one was my grandmother lived in Revere, and there was all these duck pin bowling. There was like this whole strip right in Revere. They had Kelly's roast beef and they had great chowder. And I went duck pin bowling for the first time, which is something I'd never heard of, for these little pins, these little stick pins. So, I mean, I have so many of them. Like one of my favorite foods ever is legal seafood fish chowder, different shit like that, that I could talk for days about Boston. But
a lot of people don't know, like the candlepin bowling. Like I grew up only playing candlepin.
Right.
And that if we were going to go play what people consider to be traditional bowling, we called it big ball bowling, because you had to search for a place to go big ball bowling, right, because every bowling alley was candlepin. Right. And I had no idea that candlepin bowling was a regional thing.
Right.
Just like I didn't know fluff was a regional thing.
Right. Well, like growing up, you think that you could get yodels and ring dings and devil dogs anywhere. Drake's was a New York regional bakery. I was like, wait, I can't get yodels on the West Coast? What do you mean? So it's interesting, the regional culture of how it works. But, the good news about this music is it is regional as well as national, as well as international, and music can just travel anywhere. And I think we've been blessed, you and I, to work in this business for our whole lives pretty much. And the fact is, you can spread your gospel through your podcast. You have a platform. And much like Jose or anybody has a platform at Octane or whatever. And for me, it's making movies. And if I could spread that out there, it's a beautiful life,
Oh, I almost forgot. You got to tell me your Extreme story.
Yeah. So Extreme was interesting because they were my I worked at A&M Records, and we signed Extreme. And Extreme was from Boston, so they had some regional traction. But they were like, do something with Extreme, like get them out there. So I called a radio station. It was a top 40 station in Syracuse, New York. And I said, hey, man, I got this band. And I would love to, can we do something together in Syracuse and get you to play the record? And he listens to the record and he says, well, yeah, you got this More Than Words song. I mean, that's could be something. And I said, he goes, the rest of the record's like a hard rock record and we don't play that music. And I said, I know, but look, this song could be something. We're going to work this song. They're in Boston. They could drive up to Syracuse. We could do a show. He's like, all right, I'll tell you what, there's a junior high school that's been begging me to do something with them, to get them something for an assembly. And I go, oh, a junior high school. All right, let me check. I mean, I know we want to do something, but I'm not sure about junior high school. So I'm like, all right, let me check. So I say, hey guys, how do you feel about playing in junior high school? They're like, whatever, we'll do it if you want to promote it.
They played my high school in 1987. Right. I still have the T-shirt.
Right. So this is probably 1989 or whatever, right? And so we go to this junior high school, and the principals are all like, all right, you got to sit on the floor and you got to stay down. That's it. Otherwise, the assembly's over. Okay. So they start rocking. They do a couple songs. They play More Than Words, and everybody's like, wow, what a great song. And then I forget the song they played right after that, but the More Than Words got them thinking, right? That this is a real deal thing. Like, this could be a big band, these kids. And all of a sudden they jump in, I forget the song, and everybody starts jumping up, and girls start literally taking off their training bras and throwing them at Nuno, right? Because Nuno's like this good looking rock star, and him and Gary. And I'll never forget, and the principal's trying to like get order. And he like wants to pull the mic, and I'm kind of talking him like from getting on stage and trying to pull the mic. And Gary Doones is the program director. He's like, come on, calm down. Let's go out and get some water. It'll be fine. Like, he calms him down. Let the kids, there's only 5 more minutes. Like, let it go. And then it ends and everybody leaves. And the band was like, that was surreal. I was like, yeah, welcome to rock stardom, gentlemen. It's going to happen for you. And then cut to years later, I'm working with Rihanna at Def Jam, and all of a sudden, who walks backstage but Nuno? And I was like, I hadn't checked on who was playing in the band, and like, Nuno McHugh. He's like, what the fuck? So we caught up and had a great hang and talked about the years in between, because he's had a great, interesting career, Nuno. So, but yeah, that was my Extreme story. It was fun. My first time I
had him on the podcast recently, and it was just really interesting to hear that even though he's been out in LA for all those years and he's worked with so many artists outside of the rock genre and all of that, within 15 minutes of he and I talking just like you and I are, his accent was back, his attitude was back. He's like, fuck this and that. And he's like, he went full masshole right again.
Right,
and it came,
masshole.
Like,
is that a term? Wait, stop. Is that a term? Masshole?
Oh, absolutely. We call ourselves that.
I never heard that. That's genius.
Really?
Yeah. Well, that's what we Yankee fans would think of the Red Sox fans. Masshole. Like, you go evil.
Yeah,
Empire,
we call ourselves
masshole.
That. It's like when I call myself the baddest bitch in Boston. It's like, well, if I'm calling myself a bitch, you calling me a bitch, like, it doesn't do anything.
Right.
It's like, I know I'm a bitch. I call myself that. So we refer to ourselves as massholes, and it's like the most masshole thing to do to, like, so if you guys as your smelly, dirty Yankees fans are going to throw barbs at us, then we're just going to use it as a term of endearment, know?
Again, the music, look, here's a good one for you. It brings us all together, right?
Right.
It's not about it's not about Yankee or Red Sox fans. It's about the music. So, Mistress Carrie, to you, I say thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
And let's keep spreading the word about the movie.
There he is, Jonathan McHugh, the director and one of the producers of Long Live Rock, Celebrate the Chaos. The premiere is on Thursday night, March 11th at 8 p.m. In the show notes of this podcast is a link for you to get tickets, the official website, and don't forget the corresponding playlist. Oh my God, there is some great music that goes along with episode 40 of the Mistress Carrie podcast. Once again, thank you so much to our sponsors, Digital Federal Credit Union at dcu.org, and of course, MistressCarrie.com for sponsoring this week's episode. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss anything with the Mistress Carrie podcast. New episodes every Wednesday, and it includes the Sit Rep. Get all your rock news and music headlines in less than 5 minutes every weekday. And if you don't mind, give us a 5-star review and leave us a comment. And join me every Tuesday night at 8:30 Eastern Time live on my Facebook page for Cocktails in the War Room. The Mistress Carrie podcast, a proud member of the Pantheon Podcast Network.